Captain Hyun-Woo Kim stared at the readings on his console and frowned because nothing made sense about what his ship was detecting in the Kepler 442 system, and the energy signature was unlike anything in the galactic databases, which meant either their sensors were broken or they had found something completely new and unknown. The research vessel Curiosity's Edge was small compared to military ships, but it was fast and packed with the best scanning equipment that Earth could build. And right, now every sensor was screaming that there was something massive hidden in the asteroid field ahead of them, and Chief Engineer So-Young Park was already running diagnostics to make sure their equipment was working properly. Captain, the readings are correct, So-Young called from her station while her fingers danced over the control panels. Whatever is out there is big, and it has some kind of power source that is still active after what looks like thousands of years. Dr. Taemin Lee looked up from his xenoarchaeology workstation where he had been studying the preliminary scans, and his eyes were wide with excitement, because this was exactly the kind of discovery that every archaeologist dreamed of finding during their career. The metal composition is definitely human in origin, but the design patterns are completely unknown, and the energy readings suggest technology far beyond anything we have ever developed. Navigator Ji-won Choi was already plotting a course through the asteroid field because her job was to get them safely to whatever they had found, and she had been flying ships through dangerous space for 15 years without losing a single crew member. Captain, I can get us there, but we need to be careful, because some of these asteroids are moving in patterns that do not make sense, and it almost looks like they are protecting something. Hyunwoo had been commanding research missions for 8 years, and he had learned to trust his crew completely, because each of them was the best at what they did, and when they all agreed that something was important, then it was worth investigating no matter how dangerous it might be. Take us in G1, but keep the engines ready for a fast exit, and So-Young, make sure our shields are at maximum power. As the Curiosity's Edge moved deeper into the asteroid field, the crew could see that the rocks were not naturally formed but had been placed in specific positions like a defensive wall around something valuable. And when they finally cleared the last row of asteroids, they all gasped at what they saw, floating in the empty space beyond. The ship was enormous and ancient and beautiful in a way that made their modern vessel look like a child's toy, and it was easily 10 times larger than any human ship that had ever been built, with graceful curves and strange symbols carved into its hull that seemed to glow with their own inner light. Those markings, Taemin whispered as he enhanced the visual feed on his screen. Some of them look like ancient Korean script but mixed with symbols I have never seen before, and the metal itself appears to be some kind of alloy that should not be possible to create with known technology. So-Young was studying the engineering scans, and her voice was filled with amazement. Captain, this ship has been here for at least 3,000 years according to the radiation dating, but it still has active power systems, and the reactor design is completely beyond our understanding. Ji-won brought their ship closer to the ancient vessel, and she could see docking ports that looked compatible with modern human ships, even though they were thousands of years older. Captain, there are airlocks that look like they were designed for human use, and the ship is definitely of human origin, but from a time period when humans were supposed to be primitive and earthbound. Hyunwoo made the decision that would change everything for humanity. We are going aboard, and we are going to find out who built this ship and why it has been waiting out here for 3,000 years. And So-Young, I want you to monitor our life support systems while we explore. The docking was smooth because the ancient ship seemed to recognize their vessel and guide them into the correct position, and when they cycled through the airlock, they found themselves breathing air that was perfectly suited for human lungs and walking through corridors that were clearly designed for human proportions. The interior of the ship was as magnificent as the outside, with walls that seemed to be made from a single piece of metal that had been shaped and molded like clay, and lighting systems that activated as they approached and followed them down the corridors like the ship was welcoming them home. Taemin was recording everything with his portable scanners, and his excitement was growing with every step. These inscriptions along the walls tell a story about humans who traveled between the stars and fought great battles against enemies that wanted to destroy or enslave all free peoples. So-Young found an access panel that opened at her touch, and when she connected her diagnostic equipment to the ship's systems, her jaw dropped at the readings. Captain, this ship has manufacturing facilities that could build anything we can imagine and power systems that generate more energy than our entire colonial fleet combined. Ji-Wan was studying the ship's layout on a display that had activated when they entered the main corridor. Captain, the bridge is 3 levels up and there are quarters for a crew of about 50 people, but there are also sections that are sealed and marked with warning symbols as they made their way toward the bridge. The ship began to change around them with systems activating and displays lighting up, and a gentle vibration that suggested massive engines were starting to come online after centuries of sleep. When they reached the bridge, they found seats that adjusted automatically to fit their bodies and control panels that responded to their touch, even though the technology was thousands of years more advanced than anything they had ever seen. The main view screen flickered to life and showed them a holographic image of a man in what looked like an ancient Korean military uniform, and when he spoke, his words were in perfect modern Korean, which should have been impossible. "Greetings, descendants of the First Fleet," the hologram said with a voice that sounded both ancient and timeless. "I am Sung-Ho, the guardian intelligence of this vessel, and I have been waiting for your return to the stars for 3,000 years. Hyun-woo stepped forward because, as captain, it was his responsibility to respond. "Who are you and who built this ship and why have you been waiting for us?" "I am the artificial intelligence created by your ancestors who left this ship as a sentinel to watch over human space until the day when their descendants would return to claim their heritage among the stars," Sung-Ho replied. "This vessel is the eternal guardian flagship of humanity's first great fleet that once ruled a peaceful federation of worlds So Young could not contain her excitement. "What happened to them and why don't we have any records of this civilization? There was a great war against those who would enslave all free peoples, and your ancestors chose to scatter and hide rather than see humanity destroyed. And they left ships like this one to wait for the day when humans would be strong enough to reclaim their place among the stars." Suddenly alarms began sounding throughout the bridge and Sung-Ho's expression became grave. "Long-range sensors detect an approaching fleet of Vorthak Empire ships, and they come seeking slaves and plunder, as they have done to countless worlds." Ji-Wan checked the tactical display and her face went pale. "Captain, there are over 200 ships approaching and they will be here in 6 hours, and our research vessel cannot possibly fight that many enemies." Hyun-woo looked at the ancient AI. "Can this ship fight them?" "The Eternal Guardian was built for exactly this purpose," Sung-Ho replied as the ship's systems began powering up around them. "Your ancestors knew that one day you would need protection, and they built this vessel to be operated by a small crew of determined humans." The bridge came fully alive with displays and control systems that seemed to understand what the crew needed before they even asked, and So Young found herself automatically understanding how to operate engineering systems that were more advanced than anything in human space. Captain Ji-Wan called from the navigation station. "The ship is offering to teach me how to pilot it, and the control interface is appearing in my mind like I have always known how to use it." Taemin was studying historical records that were appearing on his console. "Captain, these files show that ancient humans fought and defeated multiple galactic empires using tactics and technology that made them nearly invincible." The view screen showed the approaching Vorthak fleet getting closer, and Hyun-woo knew that the next few hours would determine not just the fate of his crew, but possibly the future of all humanity among the stars. The Eternal Guardian continued to power up around them, and Sung-Ho began explaining what had happened to humanity's first great civilization, while the crew tried to understand how they had gone from being archaeologists to the operators of the most powerful warship any human had ever seen. "Your ancestors were not the primitive people that current history suggests," Sung-Ho said as holographic displays showed images of vast human cities among the stars. 3,000 years ago, humans ruled over 40 star systems in alliance with other peaceful species, and we were known throughout the galaxy as the Star Wanderers." So Young was studying the engineering systems, and her amazement grew with every new system she discovered. "Captain, these power cores use principles that our best scientists have only theorized about, and the manufacturing bays can literally create matter from energy and reshape it into anything we need." Tae-min was reading through historical files that told the story of humanity's golden age among the stars. According to these records, humans were master diplomats and strategists who preferred to avoid war, but when forced to fight, they were absolutely ruthless in protecting innocent people. Ji-won had connected her consciousness with the ship's navigation systems, and she could feel the Eternal Guardian responding to her thoughts, like it was a living creature that wanted to help her succeed. "Captain, I can sense every system on this ship, and it feels like I was born to pilot something this advanced. The Vorthak Empire has enslaved over 300 species," Sung-ho explained while tactical displays showed the approaching enemy fleet. "They use superior technology and overwhelming numbers to crush any resistance, and then they take entire populations as slaves for their industrial worlds." Hyun-woo studied the enemy fleet composition on the main screen and saw that they were facing cruisers and battleships that were each larger than any human military vessel. How can one ship fight against 200 enemies even with advanced technology? Because this ship was designed by humans who understood that our species' greatest strength has always been adaptability and determination, Sung-ho replied. The Eternal Guardian does not rely on massive crews or overwhelming firepower, but on the ability of a small group of humans to think creatively and act decisively. So-young discovered that the ship's manufacturing systems were already beginning to produce ammunition and repair materials. "Captain, the ship is preparing for battle automatically, and the weapon systems are unlike anything in our databases, and they appear to manipulate space and time itself." The first Vorthak scout ships dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the star system and immediately began scanning for threats while their massive fleet prepared to follow, and Sung-ho showed the crew how their enemies typically operated. The Vorthak always send scouts first to identify any military resistance, and then they deploy their full fleet to crush all opposition before landing troops to capture slaves, Sung-ho explained. They have never encountered serious resistance because most species surrender when they see the size of the Vorthak fleet. Tae-min found files that described previous battles between humans and galactic empires. "Captain, our ancestors developed tactics that focused on mobility and precision rather than brute force, and they would use the enemy's size and numbers against them." Ji-won felt the ship responding to her desire to move, and the Eternal Guardian began gliding through space with impossible grace for something so large. "Captain, this ship moves like it weighs nothing, and the inertial compensators are so advanced that we could perform maneuvers that would turn any other ship into scrap metal." 3. Vorthak scout cruisers approached the asteroid field where the ancient human ship was hidden, and their sensors began probing for signs of advanced technology, while their captains prepared to report back to the main fleet about what they found. "They detect our power signature, but they do not understand what they are seeing," Sung-ho reported. "The Vorthak have never encountered human technology, and they assume we are some kind of abandoned automated defense system." So-young watched as the ship's weapon systems came online, and she gasped at the power readings. "Captain, the main plasma lance draws more power than our entire research vessel uses in a month, and there are dozens of other weapon systems that I do not even understand." The lead Vorthak scout ship sent a message demanding surrender and offering to spare any intelligent life forms if they submitted immediately to being processed as slaves, and Hyun-woo felt his anger rising at the casual arrogance of the alien message. "Your ancestors faced this same choice many times," Sung-ho said. "Submit to slavery, or fight against impossible odds, and they always chose to fight because they believed that freedom was worth any sacrifice." Tae-min discovered records of human tactics that had defeated multiple galactic empires. "Captain, our ancestors would study their enemies carefully and then strike at exactly the right moment using weapons and strategies that their opponents could not understand or counter." The Vorthak scouts moved closer and began using active sensors to map the asteroid field while their weapon systems powered up in preparation for destroying anything that might pose a threat to their main fleet. Ji-won felt the ship's desire to protect its crew, and she realized that the Eternal Guardian was not just a machine, but something that had been given a purpose by its human creators. "Captain, this ship wants to fight, and it has been waiting for 3,000 years to fulfill its mission." Then let's show these slavers what humans are capable of, Hyunwoo said as he settled into the captain's chair that molded itself to fit his body perfectly. The first Vorthak scout ship fired a probe into the asteroid field, and So Young watched as the ship's defensive systems automatically destroyed the probe with a precisely targeted energy beam that left no trace of what had happened. They know something is here now, Sung-ho reported, but they still do not understand what they are facing. The three scout ships spread out in attack formation and began charging their main weapons, while sending data back to their fleet about the mysterious energy readings they were detecting among the asteroids. Ji-won moved the Eternal Guardian out from behind the largest asteroid, and the Vorthak scouts finally saw what they were up against. But by then it was already too late for them to escape or call for help. The ancient human warship was magnificent and terrifying as it emerged from hiding with its hull glowing with internal power and weapon ports opening along its entire length, like the eyes of some great predator that had finally awakened from a long sleep. Fire, Hyunwoo commanded, and So Young activated the main plasma lance. The weapon that fired was unlike anything the galaxy had seen in 3,000 years, and it tore through space itself to strike the lead Vorthak cruiser, and the enemy ship simply ceased to exist as its atoms were scattered across several dimensions simultaneously. The other two scout ships tried to flee, but Ji-won piloted the Eternal Guardian with impossible speed and precision, while secondary weapon systems fired bursts of energy that phase-shifted through the enemy shields and destroyed both ships from the inside. Impossible, came the transmission from the dying Vorthak. Captain, no species has technology this advanced. In less than 30 seconds, 3 Vorthak cruisers had been completely destroyed without inflicting any damage on the ancient human ship, and Sung-ho showed the crew how their victory would be received by the enemy fleet. The main Vorthak force will receive the scout ship's final transmissions, and they will believe they are facing some kind of ancient automated defense system. Sung-ho explained. They will send more ships to investigate, and eventually, their entire fleet will come to destroy what they see as a threat. So Young studied the battle data and realized that the plasma lance had used only a tiny fraction of the ship's available power. Captain, we destroyed 3 enemy cruisers and barely drained our energy reserves, and the ship's manufacturing systems are already replacing the ammunition we used. Tae-min found historical records that showed similar battles from humanity's past. Captain, our ancestors once faced a fleet of 800 ships with only 5 human vessels, and they won by using superior tactics and technology that their enemies could not understand. Ji-won felt the ship's satisfaction at finally being able to fulfill its purpose after waiting so long. Captain, the Eternal Guardian was built to fight exactly this kind of battle, and every system on the ship was designed to give a small human crew the ability to defeat much larger enemy forces. The Vorthak main fleet received word that their scouts had been destroyed, and War Master Krelthax began deploying his forces for a full assault because he assumed he was facing some kind of automated planetary defense system that could be overwhelmed by superior numbers. They are coming, Sung-ho announced, as long-range sensors detected the approach of the entire Vorthak invasion fleet, 200 ships including battleships and heavy cruisers, and they believe they can destroy us through sheer weight of numbers. Hyunwoo looked at his crew and saw determination in their eyes because they had all chosen to be explorers, and now they found themselves as the guardians of human space against an empire that had enslaved hundreds of worlds. Then we show them that humans have returned to the stars, he said as the Eternal Guardian prepared for the battle that would determine the fate of humanity's future among the galaxies. Word of the Vorthak scout ship's destruction spread across the galactic communication networks, and species throughout known space began to take notice because the Vorthak Empire had not suffered a military defeat in over 2 centuries, and now something had destroyed 3 of their ships without taking any damage. The Galactic Trade Council emergency session was filled with representatives from dozens of species, and they all wanted to know what kind of weapon system could completely annihilate Vorthak cruisers, because most civilizations had learned to simply surrender when the slavers arrived, rather than face certain destruction. On the bridge of the Eternal Guardian, Sung-ho was showing the crew tactical displays of the approaching enemy fleet and explaining how their ancestors had developed strategies for fighting against overwhelming numbers of opponents. The key to human success in space warfare has always been mobility and adaptability, Sung Ho explained, while the ship's systems continued to prepare for battle. While other species build bigger ships with more weapons, humans learned to build ships that could think and react faster than their enemies. So Young was studying the ship's manufacturing capabilities, and she discovered that the ancient vessel could produce new types of ammunition and defensive systems in real time. During combat, Captain, this ship can literally invent new weapons while we are fighting and adapt its defensive systems to counter whatever the enemy throws at us. Taimin found historical records that showed how previous human fleets had defeated multiple galactic empires using tactics that seemed impossible to outside observers. According to these files, our ancestors once destroyed an entire invasion fleet by turning their own weapons against them, using some kind of technology that could control enemy systems. Jiwan was learning to interface more deeply with the ship's consciousness, and she could feel the eternal Guardian's eagerness to finally engage in the kind of battle it had been designed for. Captain, the ship wants me to know that it has been analyzing Vorthak tactics and technology for the past few hours, and it has already developed countermeasures for everything they can deploy against us. The first wave of Vorthak ships dropped out of hyperspace and immediately began forming attack formations, while their commanders tried to understand how 3 of their cruisers could have been destroyed so quickly and completely. War Master Krelthak stood on the bridge of his flagship and studied the sensor readings from the asteroid field where his scouts had died, and he could not understand what kind of automated defense system could produce such advanced energy signatures. Deploy probe ships to map the entire area, he commanded. Whatever destroyed our scouts must have limited ammunition, and once we understand its capabilities, we can overwhelm it with superior firepower. 20 Vorthak. Probe ships moved toward the asteroid field while the main fleet maintained a safe distance and prepared to launch a massive bombardment once they identified the location of the mysterious weapon system. Sung Ho detected the approaching probes and activated the Eternal Guardian stealth systems, which used technology that bent light and energy around the ship, making it nearly invisible to conventional sensors. They are trying to locate us, but they cannot understand the principles behind our defensive systems. So Young watched as the ship's manufacturing bays began producing specialized ammunition designed specifically to counter Vorthak shield technology. Captain, the ship is creating weapons that are tailored to exploit weaknesses in their defensive systems, and each shot will be more effective than conventional weapons. The probe ships entered the asteroid field and began using deep penetration scanners to search for the source of the energy readings, while their mother ships prepared to target anything that appeared threatening. G1 moved the Eternal Guardian through the asteroid field like a ghost, and the massive ancient ship flowed around obstacles that should have been impossible for something so large. To avoid while remaining completely hidden from enemy sensors, strike fast and fade away. Sung Ho advised, your ancestors learned that the best way to fight superior numbers was to appear suddenly, destroy as many enemies as possible, and then disappear before they could respond effectively. The first probe ship passed within a few hundred meters of the hidden human vessel, and So Young fired a single precise shot that completely destroyed the Vorthak ship while making it appear that the probe had suffered some kind of accident. 1 down, 19 to go, Taemin said as he watched the tactical display show the remaining probe ships spreading out to search for whatever had destroyed their companion. Over the next hour, the Eternal Guardian systematically destroyed every probe ship that the Vorthak sent into the asteroid field, and each kill was made to look like equipment failure or collision with space debris. War Master Krelthax began to realize that he was facing something far more dangerous than an automated defense system. No machine could be this intelligent or this precise, he told his subordinates. We are facing an enemy that thinks and plans, and that means we are dealing with a hostile species. The main Vorthak fleet began moving closer to the asteroid field, and their heavy battleships powered up weapon systems that could crack planets while their commanders prepared for a full-scale assault. They are getting impatient, Sung Ho observed. Soon they will begin bombardment of the entire area, and we must act before they can bring their heavy weapons to bear. So Young discovered that the ship could produce missiles that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Captain, these weapons can strike Targets regardless of shields or armor because they attack from directions that do not exist in normal space. Ji-won felt the ship's readiness for full combat, and she realized that everything up until now had been just preliminary skirmishing. Captain the Eternal Guardian is ready to show these slavers what human engineering can accomplish when we put our minds to it. The Vorthak fleet formed a massive bombardment formation with their heaviest ships in the center and began charging. Weapons that could sterilize entire continents while fighter wings prepared to swarm anything that survived the initial barrage. "Now we fight as our ancestors fought," Hyun-woo declared, and the Eternal Guardian dropped its stealth systems and appeared in the middle of the enemy formation like an avenging angel. The ancient human warship was magnificent as it materialized among the Vorthak vessels and immediately began firing weapons that turned enemy ships into expanding clouds of plasma while moving with impossible grace through formations that should have trapped it. So Young activated manufacturing systems that produced swarms of self-guided missiles that phased through Vorthak shields and destroyed ships from the inside, while defensive systems turned enemy fire back on the ships that had fired it. Taemin watched in amazement as the ship's tactical computers analyzed enemy weaknesses faster than conscious thought and developed new attack strategies for each type of Vorthak vessel. They encountered Ji-won piloted the massive ship through maneuvers that should have been impossible for something so large, and she could feel the Eternal Guardian responding to her will like it was an extension of her own body. "Impossible, War Master," Krelthak shouted as he watched 20 of his ships destroyed in the first minute of combat. "Nothing that large should be able to move like that." The battle raged through the star system as the ancient human ship systematically destroyed Vorthak vessels while avoiding damage through a combination of superior technology and tactics that the enemy could not understand or counter. "This is how the Star Wanderers fought," Sung-ho explained, as the ship's weapons carved through enemy formations, with intelligence and adaptability rather than brute force. So Young watched power readings that showed the ship was still using only a fraction of its total capabilities. "Captain, we have destroyed over 50 enemy ships, and we are not even beginning to strain our systems." The remaining Vorthak ships tried to flee, but the Eternal Guardian was faster, and its long-range weapons could strike targets across the entire star system with perfect accuracy. Taemin studied the tactical data and realized they were witnessing the return of military tactics that had been lost for 3,000 years. "Captain, our ancestors did not just build advanced ships, they developed an entirely different philosophy of warfare," Sir one of Krelthax's officers reported. "Long-range sensors detect additional energy signatures approaching from the direction of human space, and they appear to be moving at maximum speed." The War Master studied the sensor readings and his blood ran cold as he realized what was happening. "Send word to all Vorthak territories," he commanded. "The humans have returned and they are no longer the weak species we remember." On the bridge of the Eternal Guardian, Sung-ho's sensors detected the approaching signatures and his expression filled with something that might have been joy. "Captain, your people received your distress signal and they are coming to help." Hyun-woo looked at the tactical display that showed hundreds of human ships approaching at maximum burn while his ancient vessel continued to fight the remaining Vorthak forces. "The fleet answers," Ji-won whispered as she realized that humanity's entire space navy was racing toward them across the void. So Young felt tears in her eyes as she understood that they were no longer alone in their fight against the galactic slavers. "Captain, the cavalry is coming." Admiral Min-soo Jang stood on the bridge of the flagship New Seoul and watched as humanity's entire space fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler 442 system, where they had received the most incredible distress signal in human history, and what they saw when they arrived made even veteran spacers gasp in amazement. 300 human ships of every class and configuration had responded to Captain Hyun-woo's emergency transmission, and they represented every human colony and Earth itself, because when the message arrived explaining that humans had ancient warships and were fighting a galactic empire, every available vessel had been pressed into service. "Admiral, we are detecting massive energy signatures and debris from at least 100 destroyed ships," reported combat engineer Haewon Shin from her station. "Whatever Captain Kim found out here, it appears to be winning a battle against overwhelming odds." Fleet Navigator Do Hyun Ko was studying the tactical displays, and his expression showed amazement at what the sensors were revealing. "Admiral, there is a single ship out there that appears to be fighting the entire Vorthak invasion fleet, and it is winning." The ancient Eternal Guardian was a magnificent sight as it moved through space among the remaining enemy vessels, and its weapon systems were creating light shows that could be seen across the entire star system, while Vorthak ships exploded one after another. "That has to be Captain Kim's discovery," Admiral Minsu said as he watched the impossible battle playing out on his screens. "Signal the fleet to form attack formation and prepare to support whatever that ship is doing." So Young watched from the bridge of the ancient vessel as hundreds of modern human ships appeared on sensors, and she felt her heart swell with pride as she realized that all of humanity had come to help them fight the slavers. "The entire colonial fleet is here," she reported to Captain Hyunwoo. "Every ship that Earth and the colonies could send." Sung Ho immediately began transmitting data packets to the approaching human vessels, and the ancient AI systems interfaced with modern computers to share 3,000 years of advanced technology and tactical knowledge. "Your modern ships are well designed, but they lack the weapons and defensive systems that your ancestors developed," Sung Ho explained. "I am transmitting upgrade specifications that your engineers can implement immediately." Haiwan stared at her console as streams of data began flooding into the new Soul's computer systems, and she realized she was looking at technology that was centuries ahead of anything humanity currently possessed. "Admiral, these schematics show weapon designs that could increase our firepower by a factor of 10, she reported while her fingers flew over the controls to begin implementing the upgrades, "and the defensive systems could make our ships nearly invulnerable." Taemin was coordinating the data transfer from the Eternal Guardian to the entire human fleet, and he marveled at the ancient civilization's knowledge. "Captain, our ancestors did not just build better ships, they developed an entirely new understanding of physics and engineering, the Yao." Modern human ships began implementing the ancient upgrades, and their hulls started glowing with the same inner light that made the Eternal Guardian so magnificent, while their weapon systems reconfigured themselves using principles that their crews barely understood. Fleet Navigator Do Hyun found himself interfacing with tactical systems that seemed to read his thoughts and anticipate his commands. "Admiral, the navigation computers are showing me maneuvers and formations that I never imagined were possible." War Master Krelthax watched in horror as hundreds of additional human ships appeared and began implementing technology that turned them from ordinary vessels into weapons of incredible power. "How is this possible?" he demanded. From his subordinates, the humans were supposed to be a weak species with primitive technology. Admiral Minsu opened communications with the ancient ship and heard Captain Hyunwoo's voice for the first time since the crisis began. "Captain Kim, this is Admiral Jang with the Colonial Fleet, and we are here to support you." "Admiral, it is good to see friendly ships," Hyunwoo replied. "We have discovered that humanity has a much longer history in space than we knew, and right now we are fighting to protect that legacy." The combined human fleet began moving into attack formation, and the contrast was stunning between the sleek, modern ships and the ancient, magnificent Eternal Guardian. But now they all shared the same inner glow and advanced weapon systems. So Young coordinated with Haiwan to integrate the ancient and modern technologies. "The manufacturing systems on this ship can produce upgrade modules for your entire fleet," she reported. "We can turn every human vessel into a ship that matches the technology of our ancestors." Ji-won felt the presence of hundreds of human pilots as their navigation systems linked with the ancient ship's consciousness, and suddenly she was not alone in piloting the massive vessel, but part of a fleet-wide network of human minds working together. "This is how the Star Wanderers fought their greatest battles," Sung Ho explained. "Not as individual ships, but as a single organism with multiple bodies all working toward the same goal." Saudin Thiaur. Upgraded human fleet struck the remaining Vorthak forces like a hammer blow, and enemy ships that had seemed invincible moments before began exploding under the combined firepower of ancient and modern human weapons. Taemin studied the battle data and realized they were witnessing the rebirth of humanity as a major galactic power. Captain, we are not just winning this battle. We are announcing to the galaxy that humans have returned to the stars. Du Hyun coordinated fleet movements that would have been impossible without the ancient navigation systems. Admiral, our ships are moving like dancers, and the Vorthak cannot predict our maneuvers or counter our formations. The tide of battle turned completely as 300 upgraded human ships supported by the ancient Eternal Guardian systematically destroyed the Vorthak invasion fleet while suffering minimal casualties themselves. Hae-1 watched power readings that showed the modern ships were now generating energy levels that rivaled the ancient vessel. Admiral, we have gone from being outgunned to having technological superiority over the enemy. War Master Krelthax realized that his forces were facing complete annihilation. Signal retreat to all ships, he commanded. We must escape and warn the Empire about what the humans have become. But the human fleet had learned coordination and tactics from their ancestors, and they moved to block every escape route while their weapons reached out across impossible distances. To destroy fleeing enemy vessels, no one leaves. Admiral Minsu declared, "These slavers came here to capture our people, and now they will answer for every species they have enslaved." Captain Hyunwoo felt the satisfaction of the ancient ship as it finally fulfilled the purpose for which it had been created. Sung-ho, how many Vorthak ships remain? 17 vessels, Admiral. The AI replied, and they are requesting terms for surrender. So-young looked at readings that showed the human fleet was still at full combat readiness. Captain, we have the power to destroy their entire fleet, but perhaps it is time to show them that humans fight for justice rather than conquest. The battle ended when the last Vorthak ship surrendered, and Admiral Minsu coordinated with Captain Hyunwoo to establish control over the defeated enemy fleet, while engineers from both ancient and modern ships worked together to secure the prisoners. Tae-min began cataloging the technology they had recovered and the knowledge they had gained. Captain, this day has changed everything for humanity, and we are no longer just another minor species, but inheritors of a galactic legacy. Ji-won felt the combined consciousness of the human fleet and realized that they had become something greater than the sum of their individual parts. Captain, we have not just won a battle, we have rediscovered what it means to be human in the vastness of space. Signal Earth and all the colonies, Admiral Minsu commanded. Tell them that humanity has ancient allies and technology beyond our dreams, and we are ready to take our place among the great powers of the galaxy. Sung-ho's voice carried satisfaction that had been building for 3,000 years. The star. Wanderers have returned, and the galaxy will remember why humans were once feared and respected throughout known space. 3 months after the battle at Kepler 442, the galaxy had learned that humanity was no longer the weak newcomer species that most civilizations had dismissed, and the Vorthak Empire had formally surrendered after losing 80% of their fleet to a force they could not understand or counter. The Galactic Council chambers on the neutral world of Nexus Prime had never seen such a gathering as representatives from hundreds of species came to witness humanity's first formal address. To the galactic community as a major power captain, Hyunwoo Kim stood before the assembled delegates wearing the uniform of the new human stellar navy, and behind him, holographic displays showed images of the ancient human civilization that had once ruled 40-star systems in peace and prosperity. 3,000 years ago, our ancestors walked among the stars as the species you called the Star Wanderers. He began. They built a civilization based on cooperation and mutual defense, but when faced with extinction, they chose to scatter and hide rather than see innocent people enslaved. Dr. Taemin Lee had spent the months since the battle leading teams of archaeologists and historians to hidden sites throughout the galaxy where ancient human technology had been waiting for rediscovery, and each new find revealed more about humanity's lost heritage. The Eternal Guardian had become a mobile university where officers from every human colony came to learn the tactical and strategic thinking of their ancestors, while Sung-ho served as both teacher and living link to humanity's past. So-young Park now headed the Hybrid Technology Division, where teams of engineers worked to integrate ancient human science with modern innovations, and the results were transforming human space travel and industry at an incredible pace. The manufacturing systems alone have revolutionized our industrial capacity, she reported to the Galactic Council. We can now build ships and habitats that were impossible just months ago, and our colonies are becoming self-sufficient in ways we never imagined. Admiral Minsu Jiang had restructured the entire human colonial fleet using the ancient tactical manuals and organizational principles that Sung Ho had preserved for 3 millennia, and the results were ships and crews that operated with precision and effectiveness that amazed galactic observers. Fleet navigator Do Hyun Ko was training a new generation of human pilots in the art of multidimensional navigation and fleet coordination that allowed human ships to move through space in formations that seemed to defy the laws of physics. Our ancestors understood that space combat is not about individual heroics, but about multiple minds working as a single organism, he explained to his students. When human crews think together, they become something greater than the sum of their parts. The political implications of humanity's return to galactic prominence were staggering, as species that had dismissed humans as primitives now sought alliances and trade agreements, while former enemies reconsidered their positions. Chief Engineer Haewon Shin aboard the flagship New Seoul was coordinating the construction of new human vessels that combined ancient design principles with modern materials, and the ships that emerged from human shipyards were works of art as much as weapons of war. Every ship we build now carries the heritage of the Star Wanderers, she reported to Admiral Minsu. They are not just vessels but symbols of what humanity can accomplish when we remember who we are. The discovery of other hidden human settlements throughout the galaxy was perhaps the most remarkable development, as ancient colonies that had remained hidden for millennia began revealing themselves now that it was safe for humans to reclaim their heritage. Taemin coordinated first contact with these hidden communities, and each meeting brought new knowledge and technology, as well as thousands of humans who had preserved ancient traditions and skills that had been lost to the main human civilization. Some of these colonies have been maintaining technologies and cultural practices for 3,000 years. He reported to the Human Colonial Administration, they are living libraries of what our species was capable of at its height. The Vorthak Empire's former slave worlds were being liberated one by one as human fleets supported local resistance movements with technology and tactical advice that allowed oppressed peoples to overthrow their masters. Ji-won Choi had been promoted to Admiral of Exploration, and she commanded a fleet of combined ancient and modern ships that were making contact with hidden human settlements and bringing them back into the growing human community. Each world we find adds to our understanding of what our ancestors accomplished, she reported, and each community that rejoins us makes humanity stronger and more complete. The economic implications were equally dramatic, as human technology began appearing in galactic markets, and species throughout known space sought access to manufacturing techniques and energy systems that were centuries ahead of anything previously available. Sung Ho had begun training other artificial intelligences in the principles and ethics of ancient human civilization, and these new AIs served as advisors and teachers throughout human space while maintaining the values and wisdom of the Star Wanderers. The greatest gift your ancestors left was not their technology, but their understanding of what it means to be human in the vastness of space. The ancient AI explained, they knew that power without wisdom leads to destruction, and they built their civilization on foundations that could survive any catastrophe. The Galactic Trade Council began restructuring their economic systems to account for human manufacturing capabilities that could produce goods and materials at unprecedented rates while maintaining quality standards that exceeded anything previously seen. Military observers from dozens of species came to study human tactics and fleet operations, but they found that the ancient strategies could not be simply copied because they required the kind of intuitive cooperation that humans seemed uniquely capable of achieving. Human crews think together in ways that other species cannot replicate, reported a Centaurian military attaché. Their ships move like flocks of birds or schools of fish, with each vessel knowing instinctively what the others will do. The transformation of human society was equally remarkable, as colonies that had struggled for basic survival found themselves with technology that could terraform worlds and build cities that rivaled anything in the galaxy. Captain Hyun-woo was promoted to Admiral of Heritage and given responsibility for coordinating the rediscovery and integration of ancient human sites. throughout the galaxy, while ensuring that the lessons of the past informed present decisions. We are not trying to recreate the ancient civilization exactly as it was, he explained to the Colonial Council. We are building something new that honors our heritage while serving the needs of humans today. The cultural renaissance that followed the rediscovery of humanity's past saw artists and writers throughout human space creating works that celebrated both ancient achievements and modern aspirations, while philosophers debated what it meant to be inheritors of such a remarkable legacy. So Young established manufacturing centers on every human world where ancient technology was adapted for civilian use, and soon human colonies were, producing everything from medical equipment to entertainment systems that were generations ahead of galactic standards. Our ancestors left us tools and knowledge, but they also left us the responsibility to use them wisely, she reminded her engineering teams. Every device we build must serve humanity's highest aspirations. The discovery of the ancient human civilization's greatest secret came when Taemin found references to other hidden fleets scattered throughout the galaxy and waiting for the signal that it was time for the Star Wanderers to fully return to their place among the stars. There are more ships like the Eternal Guardian, he reported to Admiral Hyun-woo, and more AI Guardians like Sung-ho waiting for us to find them and reclaim the full heritage of our species. As news of humanity's transformation spread throughout the galaxy, other species began to reconsider their own histories, and several civilizations announced that they were beginning archaeological expeditions to rediscover their own lost golden ages. The galaxy itself seemed to be entering a new era, as the return of the Star Wanderers inspired hope that the age of conquest and slavery might finally be ending, and that cooperation and mutual respect could once again flourish among the stars. Admiral Min-soo stood on the observation deck of the New Sol and watched as combined fleets of ancient and modern human ships departed for the Outer Rim territories, where hidden colonies waited to rejoin the greater human community. Our ancestors scattered to preserve what was best about humanity, he said to his staff. Now we gather together to fulfill the promise they made to the galaxy that one day the Star Wanderers would return to bring peace and prosperity to all free peoples. The transformation was complete, but it was also just the beginning as humanity prepared to reclaim its place as guardians of freedom and justice throughout the galaxy, while honoring the sacrifice of ancestors who had waited 3,000 years for their descendants to be ready for such responsibility.